What's going on, everybody? James here from Artificial Entertainment, and today we're here to look at how to be able to set up the motion warping aspect for the Dynamic Parkour Trace System. So let's go ahead and dive in. All right, so we are back here in the project that we did, that we were using in the initial setup video, and I have created a couple of different changes just to kind of streamline things. First thing is I made an animation blueprint. This is just a simple ground locomotion jumping. With all of the movement for speed, velocity, direction, just the standard stuff being put in. So we're going to be putting some things in here later on, but I just wanted to show you guys that I did do this because all of my animations are for UE4. So I decided to switch over the skeleton and switch over the third person character mesh just for speed purposes. Now let's talk about motion warping. So now, for those of you who don't really know what motion warping is that it allows you to be able to move an animation or an actor during an animation from where it is currently to a predefined location. Now, that location is something that we had defined if we open up the character blueprint here that we did. This function here, the add or update warp targets, and these warp names are very, very important. We want to make sure that we know what these are, both the capitalization, spacing, anything that has to do with its format. We want to make sure that's exactly the same when we remember this, because this location and this name are now tied together, which means that we can use this inside of an animation montage. Now, the first thing that we're going to do before we do anything is we're going to open up the animation blueprint, go to the anim graph here, and we're going to pull off and add a default slot. This is a necessary step just for using montages. Now, with the default slot added in, we're going to go ahead and go to the content browser here. We're going to go to the tutorial assets, animations, and I got a traversal set of animations here. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to do a vaulting animation, just kind of like the most basic of action. And I have this one here that we're going to use for the example, which is just a standard, what's called the monkey vault. So to be able to get the montage, we're just going to right click, create, anim montage. And then we're also going to open up the animation sequence because we want to make sure root motion is enabled. And you want to make sure that it's enabled. Otherwise, motion warping will not work correctly. So we want to make sure root motion is enabled. Click on save. And then we can close the anim sequence, move this off to the side. And then we're going to open up the montage version of this here. Now, the way that this system works, just to show you guys one more time, is that if I walk up to this here and I press spacebar, that's right, we set it off of the jump input. You can see that warp 1, yellow, warp 2, blue, warp 3, green. So I know that I want to be able to go to like warp 1 essentially. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the notifies track of the montage here, add another track, right click, and we're going to go down to add notifies state. Now under this here, you're going to see motion warping as an option. So we're going to make it so the first point is at the beginning of the montage. And we're going to look for when the character is going to be right about dead center, because motion warping it alters the root bone. So essentially, you want to think about when the root bone is going to be reaching that location position. And at that point, you want to make sure it's at that point, which this is sort of, I guess you could say, this point here in the beginning is where we're starting from and where we want to start triggering. And then this is where we're going to reach that destination. So for this animation, that's going to be right about there. Now we also want to do another one because we have a landing location as well. So we're going to right click, add notify state, and then click on motion warping again. And we're going to look for the point in which the character kind of lands on the ground, something right about there. And then we'll just take this and drag the window up like this. Now we got to do some modifications to these actual windows here. So we'll click on the first one here and highlight it. And then we're going to go to the details panel under root motion modifier, expand this menu, and we're going to go and we'll see a bunch of options here. But the first thing we want to do is set the warp target name. Now, as I had said before, we want to make sure we know what these names are because those are going to be what we're going to enter into that space that I was just showing you on the montage. So for this one, we're going to use warp 1. So we'll go back to the montage, go to the warp target name and name it warp 1. Now, we also want to make sure ignore z-axis is unchecked and warp rotation is true. And we're going to go to the next one here, highlight it, and we're going to name this one warp 3. And this one's going to be ignore z-axis again and keeping warp rotation. Now, essentially what this is going to do is it's going to trigger from here to here, and it's going to move the actor to the warp 1 position. Then from here to here, it's going to move the actor to the warp 3 position because that's what we're telling it to do. This is warp 3. So, and then ignore z-axis just means that it actually like moves up and down. That's all that really is. Now, in order to be able to reset back once you're done with an action, you no longer need to call back to the animation blueprint for those of you who have used version 1. Everything is now internally called, so we can go ahead and just right click, add notify, and if you look here, you're going to see the reset parkour action notify. So we can just call this in just like this and click save. Now, realistically, this is all we really need to do. So we're going to go back to the BP third person character, our event graph here, and we're going to open up just find the event vault action. Now we're going to take this vault animation here. I'm just going to make sure it's highlighted. And then we're going to put this in for vault over short, just like this. Now if I compile and save, and then click on play, we should now get a nice vault over. Oh, forgot that I have disabled actions. Let's go through Dynamic Parkour Trace System, go to the miscellaneous overrides, and we'll turn off the override for MotionWarp. There we go. All right, so now if I go ahead and hit space, you can see that we do a nice vaulting action. Now the positions can be adjusted however you want, but what I can do is I'll go ahead and I'll make these a little different in size. So this way you can kind of see how it reacts under different circumstances. Oh, that's technically a low vault. Got to keep it within its object confines. So we get that. And we can do this. And as you can see, it's raising the character up to be able to match that height position every single time. So that's really all we need to do. Now, as far as like defining of additional locations, if you want to make it so that way he moves from warp 1 to warp 2, like he might post up here, and then when he lets go from here to here, he might go to warp 2 instead because that's the depth point. You can use these locations however you want. Same thing as you can use any animations you want. Think of the system as more of a selector with output locations that just also happen to work well with motion warping. It doesn't control the animations. It controls things like plane constraints and rotation values and things like that that are more actor values, but the animations themselves are entirely up to you. So that's just the standard action there. Now let's take a look if we wanted to do something like a ledge-based action. Now, if we go ahead and go to the parkour system here, the Dynamic Parkour Trace System, go to settings, and then if we click on, let's see, where is it? Ground action settings, we're going to go to miscellaneous and we're going to go to allowed actions and we're going to select the attach to ledge, or I'm sorry, the vertical wall climb to ledge. We're going to set this to true. Now we're going to compile and save, but we also want to make sure that this distance here is what we want. So if we look here, the vertical wall climb max height, this is how high up that this action is going to be able to go. So this is a very important value to make sure that you have fine-tuned to what you want. Now from here, we're going to go and open up the wall run to ledge thing here that I've got, which is just a kind of just runs forward and then climbs up a little bit and attaches to the ledge just like so. So the reason why I'm showing you guys this one is because for actions like this where they kind of attach themselves to a surface, climb up it, and then get there, there's like, for example, wall height mandals, and vertical wall runs and things like that. I've made sure to set up actions that are actually going to be really nice for making sure that their distance is proper every time. So we're going to go ahead and just right click, create anim montage. And then we're going to go ahead and open it up, make sure that root motion is enabled. So we'll set that to true. And then we're going to open up the montage here. And as you can see here, it's a nice in place now that the root motion is enabled. And we can go ahead and just do like before, add a new notify track. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to right click, add notify, motion warping. And then what we're going to do is look for when he kind of gets to the position of the wall, which is right about here. And then we're going to put this here. And this one's actually going to be warp 4. Because for actions that have a forward wall position that need like to climb up of any kind, that miscellaneous action or that miscellaneous location is being used as that kind of forward position to help with location adjustments. So that's why you'll see the red being kind of like low and in front of you sometimes with certain actions. That's the reason why. Now from here, what we're going to do is we're going to do another one. So add notify state, motion warping. And this time we're going to go to kind of like where the height point is going to be, which is, we'll say right about here. Because again, we're just looking for where the root bone would stop moving. If the pelvis are still moving or the shoulders are still moving, none of that really matters. We just want to make sure that we look for where the root bone is going to stop its movement. Now, one thing to point out is that actions like this that attach themselves to a ledge or a surface of any kind, this includes climb points, the warp rotation needs to be checked if you want to ensure that the value of the whatever it's going to be attaching to is going to get applied. So it's actually going to rotate towards the object by getting the face normal rotation. So you can keep rotation on and it'll attach itself accordingly. Now, speaking of attaching, we also need to make sure to call the notify. Now, in the system here, just like with the other one, it's all internalized now. So what we can do is just right click, go to add notify, and you're going to see a new one here that says set climbing. So we can go ahead and just click on this, and there we go. So now we can go ahead and set climbing, call that a day, and done. Now, we do need to make sure to specify the windows here. It's my bad. So we're going to name this for the warp target name is going to be warp 1. And then ignore z-axis is going to be false. Make sure the ignore z-axis is false on this as well. And then we'll click save. Now, we can also disable rotation on the first one here, and then use this to actually control the rotation when it gets closer to it. It's entirely up to you. You do not need to use warp rotation on every single warp window. You can use one to get the rotation and another one just to get like a setup position, basically like this here. Now, another thing I do recommend doing for anything that's an attachment-based option is if you go into the blend settings of your montage, take the blend out time and set it to 0.1 instead of 0.25. This just helps in making sure that things that happen towards the end of the animation are going to trigger effectively. Now, from here, what we can do is we're going to go and add this into the event, but we got to call the event first. So we're going to go to the interfaces, action events, and get the miscellaneous actions. And just like what we did up here, we can kind of just take this and then off the montage, we can just select. So I'm just copying the play montage with the mesh and then getting a select node. This way we can just have the same setup as we do with the other one, where we're going to have the enumeration for the action type be what controls the montage selector. Now, bear in mind, if you do not have an action, like if one of these actions is listed as not allowed, it's not going to actually output it. So it doesn't matter if it's blank. You can leave it blank so long as the action isn't being allowed. Now, we have the vertical wall climb the ledge here. So I'm just going to make sure that that is highlighted, and I'm going to go ahead and throw that into this slot here. Now, one thing to note is that when you're attaching to a ledge, you also want to make sure that your animation and your character locomotion or your character blueprint is going to be changed as well for the idle. So one thing that I will show you guys now, we're going to go more over climbing in another video, but this is necessary even just for like basic ledge attach functions, which are not necessarily just part of climbing, but it's a trigger of climbing. So anyways, so if you, let's see, we'll go ahead, we'll make a new function, set traversal setting or variables. And then if we grab our BP third person character, pull off and get the Dynamic Parkour Trace System and just get a reference to it. And now what we're going to do is pull off and see if it is valid. And we're going to get the question mark one, just like this. Because now what we can do is pull off of this and get active climb style. Okay, because this is going to be what our actual climb style is. If we're on a ledge, if we're free climbing, point to point, wall running, so on and so forth. This is going to help control all of your animation states. Now from here, what we can do is go back to our character locomotion, open up the locomotion here. Now I'm going to do this all inside of one, but you can do this separated out by states, by different state machines. Entirely up to you. I'm just going to do the lazy kind of basic way. So off the result here, what we're going to do is blend poses by climb type. You'll see blend poses E_climb type. Now, if we right click, we're going to be able to add ledge, point, free climb, and wall run. And then what we can do is take the active climbs type and put that into the enumeration value just like this. Now, for right now, since we only have ledge as an option, what we can do is get the ledge idle, which is this animation that I have here. And we'll go back to the animation blueprint here, and we'll just plug this in to the ledge option. Now I'm also going to take a copy of it and plug it into the point option as well. And then we'll delete the connection between these two. So though, if you don't know how to delete something, so if you have something cooked up like this, you can just hold Alt and left click and it'll delete the connection. And then from here, we're just going to blend by bool. So blend poses by bool. And then we're just going to take the active climb style, duplicate it, pull off, and enum equal, and then you can see that none is an option. So if enum is equal to none, if that's true, then we're going to do our standard ground locomotion. However, if it's not equal to true and it's equal to any one of these, then we're going to switch based off of whatever that's going to be. So again, nice easy enumeration to be able to blend poses, so that way all of your state machines and blend spaces can be easily set up. Now, we also want to make sure to add this in. So I'm going to go ahead to my event update animation here, and we're going to go set traversal variables just like so and compile and save. So now we just need to get an object that is high enough for us to perform this type of action. So I'm going to duplicate this cube. Now, these are just basic cubes. I've not done anything to them. There's nothing fancy on them. They're literally just standard cubes. Now, if I go ahead and hit play and I hit spacebar, you can see that nothing happens because it's up too high. And this is just showing, I guess, the fact that the range for the height does actually matter. I think I might have the height a little too high. Okay, so this is where the motion warp windows don't always show, or this doesn't show the how good the system is, because if I redefine these windows, which I'm going to here in a moment, you're going to see that the issue that you just saw does not happen, but this can happen if your motion warping windows are not defined correctly. And this is what I mean by this. So if we scrub back through in the animation here, technically speaking, he reaches the ledge right about here, not way over here. So we're actually going to set this earlier rather than later in the animation. And then now if I hit play, you can see that now he goes a little bit too high above it, which means that we're still not there. So you're just going to kind of keep playing around with it, because again, motion warping is going to location A, location B, blend settings, and all that other stuff. And see, now he gets on the ledge accordingly, moving left and moving right. So I think I have a climbing action being set to enable. That's the reason why it didn't stop on the ledge. Let's give that a look-see here. Yep, so we got allowed corner transitions. And let's make sure that we don't have, we're going to take the climb ups, as well as turning all that off. There we go. So now if I go ahead and click on play, go left, it'll stop right at the edge. Go right, it'll stop right at the edge. So now you can see we've climbed up, and I can adjust the height of this, move it up a little bit, because now we define the motion warp window. I might have to set the height a little bit higher. There we go. Yep, you can see that it climbs up, gets up there. I can move this down a little bit, and it'll do the same thing. Get to that nice height level. So this is what the power of the system is really, in allowing just the ability to use animations at different heights, rather than having static heights for everything. And again, all the montage notifies for set climbing or reset action are right here. Now, the way that you would use either one of these is if you're attaching to a ledge. So any action that would trigger climbing, attach to ledge from air, climb up to ledge, drop to ledge, anything that says ledge, basically. That's going to essentially need the set climbing variable, or I'm sorry, notify. But whenever you're doing something like from a ledge and vaulting over or onto and then kind of resetting back to a standard state, you're going to use the reset parkour action. So you can kind of set this up however you want, but ultimately you do want to make sure, as you saw, that your motion warp windows are set up properly. This is not the system like my system. This is unfortunately motion warping. The locations that I'm providing are accurate and being provided to, and the system is using it. However, because motion warping is very precise, it requires a very precise measurement on the windows. So you just got to play around with it a little bit until you get that nice movement. Because as you saw, it went from a kind of a jittery, jagged motion to now it sets itself very nicely. And it sets itself according to the proper height too. Now, if you have any problems with the height, the offset values here, if we go into the settings here, so I'm in the character blueprint here with the Dynamic Parkour Trace System highlighted. In the details panel, these action offsets menu are actually going to adjust the character's position. So just to show you, if I go to the miscellaneous actions, vertical wall climb to ledge, and I look at, let's say this one here, because this is going to be the up and down. So I'll set this to, instead of negative 131, I'll set this to negative 100. So actually, no, I'll set this to negative 80. So it'll essentially just like drop below the point, just to show you guys how this works. So it'll go, and now you see it's above the point actually, I guess, because a higher value would have brought it down further. But anyways, you see the point. So if I set it back to negative 131, hit play, and adjust back. So these are going to be actually offsetting the values given to motion warping, and doing so before it sends to the animation in a more predictive type fashion. Now, there's a lot more that can be done, with the ledge actions and stuff. We're going to be covering climb points in a different video and climbing itself. This is just one of a few different actions that we can use to be able to attach to a climb point / ledge. But realistically, that's kind of it when it comes to the motion warping. You're just kind of going in, defining your windows, setting your placements, and then to be able to see which locations are what. If you just show the debug spheres, you can see what locations are what. And then if we look at the character blueprint here, looking at for where it's being sent for the warp locations, or I'm sorry, the offsets here. If you ever get confused, just open up any one of the offset options here, and you can see warp 1, yellow, warp 2, blue, warp 3, green, warp 4, red. So all of it's color coded, so this way you can know exactly which one is what. Now, in the next one, we're going to be going over some climbing stuff, setting up the climb points, how to be able to set some values and stuff in there. So hope to see you guys in that one. It's going to kind of close out for this because it's really all you need to do. There's no really additional animation blueprint work. From there, it's just like creating blend spaces for left and right movements, which I will be doing more stuff on. But again, this is just kind of like the standard setup stuff. Anything that might be missing information will be later videos. But hope to see you guys in the climbing video. It's going to close it out for now. But stay tuned and stay animated.